Hello. Today we're going to talk about ear training with the moment of symmetry scale that has 5 large steps and 3 small steps. So it would be a lot like a major scale with an extra step inserted in. If I'm playing in 12-tone equal temperament and I have a major scale like this, I have large, large, small, large, 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 small. So, with a scale that has 3 of those steps, I have 1 more note, which means that I have to cram all of this first part down, basically a semitone, and then sing la-ti-do. And in fact, I think that's probably the best way to approach it, because in 13-tone equal temperament, where this scale usually lives, although it can live in other equal temperaments, everything is scrunched down. So you can hear that as it gets farther and farther up. The center of the octave is very, very unlike 12-tone equal temperament, but the stepwise intervals, or the intervals around a third, are similar. So that's what we're going to use to ear train it. We're going to focus on the middle of the octave since that is the hardest part, and how to approach that. So, our father scale, well, at least that's the temperament name. I really should call it the 5L3S scale. That's a moment of symmetry. If we play it on the 13-tone piano, we hear do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. But by the time we get to la, we've gotten so low that it's basically lay. Pretty close. The 13-tone one is a little bit higher. About 30 cents higher. Then la-ti-do. So if I'm singing it in large steps and small steps, I sing large, large, small, large, large, small, large, small, small, large, small, large, large, small, large, large. So similar to the major scale, but kind of ear-bendy toward the middle. So really, I think that's the thing to do if you're wanting to sing this scale out of thin air. Try to sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and then by the time you get to la, be shooting for a lay, like here. Do, do, do. So you can use so to find lay, or you can even go from the top. You can think do, ti, la, lay. And there you basically have it. So now that's what I'm thinking as I sing this scale ascending without the keyboard. Do, 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 do. Yeah, the idea is to get this little bundle in, this chunk, and then this chunk. So it's almost like 2 chunks of do, re, mi's. The first one pokes a little down, the major third is a little bit flat, and then by the time you get to the next one, this version of do, re, mi should be a lot flatter of fa, sol, la. Basically, it's getting flatter as you go up. Another way you can approach it is to go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te. And think of this as getting to te, but then te is so flat that it sounds like la. So we could do that as well. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te, la, ti, do, ti, la, ti, do. So those are some of the solfeggios you can think of. Obviously that's a little bit difficult with leaping, so this is a good thing to practice when you are doing it stepwise. You can also try leaping with the perfect fifth approximations in the scale, which are quite off in 13-tone equal temperament. So I like to think of them like tritones. If we have scale degree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, then scale degree 4 and 5, they're kind of like fa and so, but not really. So practicing just leaping to those is really helpful. And practicing it within the scale also. 1, 4, 5, 4, 5, 1, 2, 5, 6, 6, 5, 6, 2, 3, 6, 7, 6, 7, 3, 4, 6, 7, 6, 7, 4. And you can practice all kinds of other little points to check yourself to make sure that things sound appropriate. For example, when we sing the first 6 notes of the scale as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, or whichever you want, you're sort of approaching la, but it actually is low enough to be lay. Check that against mi and make sure that it sounds more like a perfect fourth than a major third. Because in 12-tone equal temperament, when we have do going to lay and do, mi, and lay, that makes our nice little equally divided augmented chord, right? Mi, le, so, do. But here we have something different. That should sound like a very, very low perfect fourth. It's almost a quarter tone flat of a perfect fourth, but not quite. So, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, which becomes la since it's so flat. Do, re, mi, le. So, you can think of a perfect fourth that's very, very flat for those kinds of leaps. So practicing those leaps within the scale is a really good way to sort of internalize it. And also keeping yourself away from 12-tone equal temperament for this one, because the deviations are so significant that if you hear the things from 12-tone equal temperament as you're doing it, it'll probably ruin any sense of pitch memory you have with the 13 equal version of this scale. So that is an explanation of how you can sort of ear train it. Of course, we'll go over the different ways that you can sing it. I'll sing it ascending and descending with large and small steps. Large, large, small, large, large, small, large, small, small, large, small, large, large, small, large, small. And now I'm going to try that on my own. I'm going to be aiming for a la that's low enough to be lay, and then go la, ti, do. So now I'm going to try that with solfege. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Close, I'm a little bit off. But you get the idea that you're scrunching that and then moving it. And then, of course, we could also practice it with adjacent names of the intervals from 13 equals perspective. So, of course, we still have whole steps and half steps in this scale if we're using 13-tone equal temperament. And the whole step is 2 and the half step is 1. It's just that we have one extra half step, and thus one extra note. Oh, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1. And that can be kind of difficult to get. Now, if you want to get really ambitious with this kind of scale, using arpeggiations can really challenge you. It probably won't be as helpful for internalizing it at first, but it's a good way to try and land on those fifths that sound so wrong. For example, in 12-tone equal temperament, we have, you know, do, mi, so. What if I were to just alter the intonation of that a little bit? I just want to think that I'm sagging on both mi and so. Do, mi, so. Do, mi, so. You just want to sag on so, and if you sag about a quarter tone, you'll basically get it. And you're not even really having to think about mi because it's only a hair flat. Just think of pushing down, like you would in choir if you were aiming for a note and it was lower than you wanted it to be with your ear. Do, mi, so. The problem, of course, is that the solfege gets horribly warped based on your perspective. So that is a thing that tends to only work with a few different chords, but you could use it to practice arpeggiating 13 equal chords of many kinds. For example, I could also practice arpeggiating the sort of like this augmented chord, which has a really sharp so. So in that case, I could go do, mi, lay, compared to do, mi, lay. You can see that there are slight differences. Of course, if I go do, mi, lay here, the outer interval sounds more like do, so, but the melodic content of the chord leads us to believe that it's lay because it's 4 intervals of 13 equal and then 4 intervals of 13 equal again. You can also do ascending and descending thirds with the scale, just like you can in the diatonic scale. And practicing with scale degrees is really helpful in my mind because I know that there are 8 notes in the scale and I want to get to that first note again. So I just think of them in terms of adding 2. Practicing with the thirds can be really jarring and really help you to internalize this scale because it's so different than the diatonic scale. Of course, you're not used to having 8 notes, so before you try it, really sit down and make sure that you know just sort of the numerical properties of the scale a little bit, just so that you know to sing them in the right order. So first we have 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 5, 7. Now here's where it gets interesting. Our thirds later in the scale here, involving 8 and up, are 6, 8, scale degree 6 and scale degree 8 make a third, 7, 1, so scale degree 7 is no longer the leading tone, it's more like a major 6th, so 7, 1, 8, 2, 1. So now I'm going to try to sing this with the keyboard, and then I'll try and sing it a cappella to improve my pitch memory on the scale. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 5, 7, 6, 8, 7, 1, 8, 2, 1. Yeah, it really helps if you try and ignore the fact that 7 is not supposed to be a leading tone. That was what kept tripping me up. Okay, now let me try this, thinking about the place I need to land, sort of getting to lay for scale degree 6 and then continuing from there. When I sing this, I'm also going to check myself at scale degree 6 to make sure that it sounds correct. So what I recommend doing with ascending thirds and descending thirds in this scale, mostly ascending thirds, is to get heavily invested in the top part and make sure you can sing that, because that's where things get the most warped, right? If we start at the beginning here, it's not so bad. Do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do. Do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do. You can just think of that as being slightly flat and compressing. But with this other stuff, the actual function really changes fast. So that's why it's a lot harder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sing this ascending scale. And then on the last few thirds, I'm going to check myself. It's also good to go over which thirds are major and which are minor. The third between scale degree 1 and 3 is major, minor, minor, major, minor, 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 major. So that's the thing that's so jarring about it. You'd think there actually would be more major thirds in the scale, but that's not true. The scale actually only has 2 major thirds. The one starting on scale degree 1, and then the one starting on scale degree 4. So don't let that throw you. You're probably expecting some kind of major third to sing like so T before you get back to the tonic, but that won't happen if you're singing up the scale this way. Okay, so first I try it singing with the notes. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 5, 7, 6, 8, 7, 1, 8, 2, 1. At the top of the scale, I recommend going through all the unfamiliar minor thirds that mess up our traditional sense of function. 1, 8, 2, 7, 1, 6, 8, 5, 7, 6, 8, 7, 1, 8, 2, 1. Things like that. Okay, now I'm going to attempt to sing it without. And remember, at the top, I'm just thinking of minor thirds, and then trying to get back to that original note. Maybe I can occasionally play the drone in the top part to make sure I've got it right in my head. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 5, 7, Yeah. My ear really wants to sharp that last note. So now when I try it again, since I know what my mistake and my instinct is, I can correct for that mistake. It's just like target practice when you're playing piano and you're trying to aim for a certain note and you're always high on it if you sort of leave yourself to your own devices or obey muscle memory. So now I'll bet I can do this a little bit better, thinking to myself to really push down for that last note, since I was a little bit in between these two notes but still closer to the right one. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6, 5, 7, 6, 8, 7, 1, 8, 2, 1. Better! Yeah. So I'm just thinking of pushing down and thinking of those as minor thirds. Hopefully those were some good tips for the 5L3S scale. That one can be very, very tough to sing because it's so functionally xenharmonic compared to a lot of different scales that you might learn. Thanks!